There are probably thousands upon thousands of Elden Ring build videos uploaded to YouTube from hundreds upon hundreds of content creators, myself included. Some of the videos that you will find are extremely good. They are incredibly well made and have a bounty of fantastic information that will help you improve your skills and become a better player. On the other hand, there are also many videos that do not provide such value. On the contrary, they are filled with incorrect affirmations and misinformations that can be easily debunked with a minimal amount of research. So, how do you pick the useful videos from those that are not? Honestly, there is no good answer to this question. We live in an age where there's an overabundance of content and you, the viewers, have a very limited amount of time to consume it. This is especially difficult when you take into consideration the clickbait nature of content in general. That said, while I may not have an answer to that specific question, I do have a solution to the particular problem. My dear viewer, the best way to have the perfect build is to make it yourself. Indeed, nothing will ever be as good for you as that which you create for yourself. Making your own build is the absolute best way to have the perfect build, because only you know what's right for you. I am sure that you are thinking that making a good build is hard. Well, yeah, you're right. Making a good build is hard because there are many things to take into consideration, but that is exactly where this video comes in. I am going to give you a full breakdown of everything that I personally do to make a good build, from the initial idea all the way to the final product. The objective is to give you all the tools so that you can turn your ideas into reality. I want to do this because I think that you, my dear viewer, have really good ideas, and I really want to see them. We're going to start with 3 basic concepts that can apply to every single build that you make, and then we are going to make a build from scratch, step by step. Let's get started. In order to do something, the very first thing that we have to do is understand what that thing is. In this case, a build. You will find that everyone talks about builds and makes builds and uses builds. That includes you, the viewer, and of course myself. But what exactly is a build? How can we define it? Is every stat combination a build? Can any strategy be considered a build? The answer is no. Not everything is a build. In fact, only builds are builds. If your character is rune level 300 and can do everything in the game, then you don't have a build. You have an over-leveled character. If a character has the game plan of spamming the same Ash of War of the same specific weapon using only the L2 button in your controller, then you do not have a build. That's what we call a gimmick. So, what is a build exactly? Well, I like to define a build as a series of parts, usually stats and equipment, that come together to achieve a specific interaction or a particular playstyle within a set of limitations. These parts have to work together and synergize so that the result is more than their sum. Furthermore, these parts have to yield a specific playstyle and maximize its efficiency to grant the greatest result possible. Builds follow archetypes. In Elden Ring, we have melee builds, caster builds, and hybrid builds, divided by their corresponding damage stats: strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith in arcane. But we also have builds that correspond to the type of weapons and mechanics that we take advantage of. There are slow builds with large damage to trade hits, or we have faster builds that, while may not hit as hard, take advantage of speed and status effects. As you can see, there's a lot to think about when making a build. That said, right now, I want to focus on the main characteristics of a build. There are 3: limitation, optimization, and fun. When it comes to limitation, the concept is simple. A build cannot do everything. If a build does everything, then it is not a build. Let's go back to the over-leveled character that we mentioned before. Now, there is nothing wrong with playing with a character that is over-leveled or even at the max level. But the fact of the matter remains that a build requires sacrifices. If there are no sacrifices, then there is no build. In Elden Ring, we achieve limitation by setting a specific rune level that we are going to build to. Rune level limitations allow us to reach a point of balance in which we have enough skill points to do different things, achieving variety, but also a controlled power level that allows us to keep the game's content challenging. Personally, when it comes to Elden Ring, I like to keep my characters at 2 different rune level limitations, depending on what I want to do. If I am playing PvP, I use rune level 125, and if I want to play PvE, I use rune level 150. Most of my playtime is in PvE. Specifically, I like to do a lot of co-op. For this reason, the vast majority of my builds stick to rune level 150. I believe that this is the perfect level to allow us to do different kinds of builds, but still keep the endgame bosses challenging. If you play with a character that is rune level 300, then you can do anything at any time, and you will also have a considerably higher amount of power. Again, there is nothing wrong with this, but it cannot be considered a build. A build requires sacrifices, and sacrifices come through limitation. Then we have optimization. A build has to be optimized, meaning that we have to squeeze every bit of efficiency out of every choice we make. Every single skill point, every piece of equipment has to be perfect and help achieve our ultimate goal, the idea. Whether that is to deal damage, to be tanky, to be fast, or any combination, whatever the idea is, every decision we make has to be in order to make the idea better. This sounds obvious, right? But it is very important because, going back to what we said about making sacrifices, every single decision you make when it comes to a build will lead to a consequence elsewhere. Furthermore, when we have a limited amount of resources, in this case rune levels, it is key to be able to maximize the returns of every single point of investment we make. This, my dear viewer, is what we call min-maxing. We look to minimize investment while maximizing benefit. We do this with damage, with HP, with FP, with weapon requirements, and of course, with equip load. Everything has to be perfectly aligned. No wasted points. There are hundreds of build possibilities in Elden Ring, hundreds of ideas that can come to life. The best part is that the absolute majority of all ideas can be good. They just need some optimization. Finally, and most importantly, a build has to be fun. Every single video game, regardless of what it is or how it works, has a meta. Whether that is specific routes, specific strategies, or in the case of Elden Ring, specific builds, there will always be something that is the best. This is a reality of life. It is inescapable. This means that every single player, when making a build, has to also make the very important decision. Will you be chasing the meta? If you answer yes, then you will have much less options to play with. However, if you answer no, then congratulations, you can do whatever the fuck you want. There is no right or wrong answer. There is only one truth. You, the player, need to have fun. Elden Ring is a video game and we play video games to have fun. If you force yourself to play a build that you don't like, even if it's the strongest build in the game, then it will not be as good. The highest amount of success can be achieved when the player has fun. For this reason, it is important that when you think of an idea for a build, you make sure that it is an idea that you will enjoy. Whether that is a meta build or not, a build would only be good if you have fun. So, when you are setting the limitations, when you are optimizing, when you are min-maxing, do it for fun. Maximize fun. Optimize fun. You will find that even the most weird build ideas can be efficient. Do not be afraid to experiment. My dear viewer, do not be afraid to have fun. There are many things to consider when we are making a build. Some are easy to keep track of, while others are not. The deeper you go into the build making process, the more fine-tuned it will become. The more choices and decisions that you make, the more that these choices and decisions will affect the end result. You will reach the point where a single level can make or break a build, and you will start to realize that it becomes extremely easy to make a mistake. Maybe you forgot that talismans have weight, and you ruin your equip load. It can happen. And then we have situations in which putting one more point in one stat might give us more damage than putting it in another. This is all a lot to take into consideration. Personally, I have a really bad memory, so there are times where things simply escape me, even if I write them down. For this reason, the best way to keep maximum efficiency when making a build is to use a character builder. They are also called planners, and they are a tool that lets you plan ahead by putting points in the stats that you want and selecting the equipment that you want to use in order to see how it will affect the final build. You can see damage values, defensive values, equip load, everything. It allows you to do and undo things as many times as needed in order to test and experiment different situations. In this way, when we are ready to make a final decision in-game, we already know all the most efficient ones. There are many builders out there. You can use whichever one you think is best for you. This is important because the whole build making process will be heavily based on your ability to plan ahead with this tool. I will leave a link in the description of this video to the one that I personally prefer to use. Maybe it's not the best, but it is the one that I am most comfortable with. Like I said before, use whichever one you think is best for you. In this channel, you will find many guides where I cover many of Elden Ring's concepts and mechanics. I go over every stat in the game, I go over the most important mechanics that the player can use, I provide many different build guides to inspire new ideas, and I also bring to the table a few tips that have helped me improve my build making capabilities. Now, I am sure that you are thinking, this asshole is just advertising his own content. And sure, yeah, there is some truth to that, but the fact remains that those other videos will give you knowledge and information that can help you make better decisions, and that means that you will be in a position to increase the power of any build that you make. The more you know, the more you can do. Now, while I present to you the information that I provide in my own content, you are obviously free to obtain this knowledge from any other source. It doesn't matter what article you read or what video you watch. The only thing that matters is that you are getting the correct information and that you are able to use it for your own improvement. Not only this, but I encourage you to experiment and research for yourself as well. In this way, you can combine what you learn with what you discover, and that will lead to a much stronger foundation that you can use for all of your build-making ideas. My dear viewer, the number one important thing that you can do to make a good build is simple. Know your shit. Alright, we are ready to make a build. I am going to walk you through the whole process, and we are going to create my favorite build and the one that I use the most. Combining the steps that I will describe with this example, you should be able to apply the complete procedure to every single build that you make in the future. Once you understand this process, it will become second nature to you, and you will be able to complete full build ideas in mere minutes. Here we go. So, what do you want to play? This can be a very difficult question to answer or an extremely easy one depending on the player. When you decide to sit down and make a build, you have to start with an idea. An idea can be anything. It can be extremely specific or it can be extremely vague. It can be a character concept or it can be the use of an exact mechanic. It can also be a focus on one or more particular stats. A build idea can come out of anything. For example, your idea can be very specific, like, I want to use the golden halberd. Or it can be as broad as, I want to make a witch. Maybe you want to base your build on different stats, like a pure strength build or a hybrid one like dexterity arcane builds. You can even base your build on a certain mechanic, like a build that specializes in stance breaking. These are all simple examples of different kinds of ideas that you can start with. I am sure that you, my dear viewer, have noticed that this means that there are infinite build possibilities, and that is the best part of build making. If you can think it, you can build it. I am sure that all of this sounds obvious. I mean, of course you need an idea, right? The thing is that being set on your idea is extremely important. The more convinced you are of your idea, the easier it will be to make the decisions needed to make it happen. If you do not have an idea or you're not sure about it, there is a higher possibility of making either the wrong decision or an inefficient one. The idea is the thing that we will always come back to. The looks of the character, the feel of the character, the stats of the character, and the equipment that it uses, it is all much easier to decide if you establish your idea. For the purposes of this video, we are going to make a build that I like to call the Toolbox Strength. It is a build that uses strength-based weapons alongside a myriad of support options in order to be ready for every situation that the game can throw at us. As with everything in this guide, you can find a link to the full build in the description of the video. That said, we will be making a few changes as this is a build that I am constantly evolving. Once you have your idea, the next thing to do is decide on the equipment that you will use. This includes armor, weapons, and talismans. Maybe it seems weird to you that we do things in this order, but it is important because all of these things have weight and they all affect our equip load. This is especially true for talismans like the Erdtree Favor and the Great Jar Arsenal that directly increase our maximum equip load. Once you have your armor, your weapons, and your talismans set, you will know the exact weight and equip load that your character has. With this information, we can start putting points into endurance, the first stat that we will min-max. Endurance is a very opinionated stat. Some players believe that you should have the minimum amount of endurance possible in order to keep your desired role type, be that medium or fast. There are other players that prefer to increase their character's endurance in order to have more stamina or more flexibility when it comes to real-time equipment choices. There is no right or wrong way to do things, but I personally believe that the endurance of a character should be the lowest possible. This stat needs to be perfectly min-maxed, down to the decimal. If you want a medium load, put points into endurance until you are at 69.99% equip load. And if you want a light load, do so until you have 29.99%. So, start with the fashion you want to wear, the weapons that you want to use, and the talismans that you prefer, and then put the fewest points possible into endurance. Use that planner and fine-tune it, because every point that you save from endurance is a point you gain in damage and survivability. Now, you might be a player that likes to hard swap different weapons depending on the situations that you're in. This is a very good skill to have. In these cases, you will have to decide the pool of weapons that you intend to use and then build your endurance to be the minimum possible to wield the heaviest one. In that way, you can assure that as long as you can equip the heaviest weapon, you can swap to all of the other ones. Finally, we cannot forget that some armor pieces and talismans also provide our character with additional skill points. Using these pieces will mean that you will have to make less investment into these particular stats later on, so it is important to have it set up first so that we can correctly min-max afterwards. I cannot overstate how important this step is. This is the point where you get all of your pieces together. This is when you decide if you want to use a shield, a great shield, or no shield. You decide if you want to stack HP regeneration items or if you want to go for full damage potential. This is when you organize your build to have the perfect synergies between your weapons, talismans, armors, and ashes of war. This is when your character is actually born. For our example build, I want to look like a golden knight using one of my favorite fashions, and then I want to focus on high defenses, high HP, and some HP regeneration. After equipping everything, I put points into endurance until level 37, which drops my equip load to a perfectly min-maxed 69.99%. It keeps me in a medium load and I get to use all the tools that I want. Remember, focus on looking good, focus on your favorite weapons, and then put the minimum points of endurance possible. After that, we turn our attention to the other stats. And speaking of other stats, so, at this time you should have a character concept set up with all of the corresponding equipment and the right amount of endurance to keep your load type under control. Next, we need to start putting the rest of our skill points into the character's other stats. The first thing that I like to do when it comes to this is to put Vigor at 60 and Faith at 12. No matter what build I am making, regardless of what kind of idea I am working on, I always do this. Vigor at 60, Faith at 12. There are 2 videos in this channel where I explain in detail why I like to do this. One video for 60 Vigor and one for 12 Faith. As always, if you're interested in understanding why I do this, feel free to check them out. I will leave links in the description. But for the purposes of this video, you have to know that HP is very important in Elden Ring. It increases your survivability, it makes the armor you are wearing better, and most importantly, it gives you the possibility of making mistakes with fewer consequences. There is probably nothing in the game that can one-shot you if you have 60 Vigor and some relatively protective armor. Normally, I am a person that is open to change and experimenting with different possibilities, but 60 Vigor is certainly an exception. There are very few circumstances in which I will run less than 60 Vigor. I think that it is extremely important and enormously useful. More than 60 Vigor is definitely a waste, but less than 60 Vigor is taking one hell of a risk. As for 12 Faith, the fact of the matter is that we get a lot of quality of life support incantations for a very small investment into this stat. It will cost most classes about 3 or 4 points to get 12 Faith, and every single one of those points is worth it. Flame Cleanse Me, Bestial Vitality, the Elemental Resistance incantations. There is so much we can do with so little. 12 Faith increases your character's survivability exponentially, and you do not even need much FP to use any of these options. Most builds won't even notice the few points missing from other stats, and what we get in return is, quite frankly, too good to pass up. That being said, I am not as adamant on 12 Faith as I am on the 60 Vigor. While 12 Faith can be used in probably 90% of build ideas, I acknowledge that there are some builds that cannot spare the points. I have a few intelligence full casters that completely ignore Faith, and that's okay. Depending on the build that you are making, we might take these points from Faith and put them elsewhere when we are fine-tuning the build. But for now, keep Faith at 12. It is too much value to ignore. The build is starting to take a good shape now. We have taken care of the survivability side, now let's move on over to the damage side. We need to put points into the corresponding stats to cover for requirements, and then we need to push soft caps to increase the amount of damage that our attacks will do. When it comes to requirements, remember that you need to keep in consideration not only the weapons that you will use, but also any sorcery and incantation that you want to cast. For our build, we need to hit 22 strength and 12 dex to use the weapons that we have equipped. Later on, we're gonna push strength further, but for now, this is the minimum that we need. That said, remember that we also have to meet the requirements of any spell that we wish to cast. We already have 12 Faith, which covers most of our options, but there are other things that I want to use. Specifically, there are 3 other things that I want to take advantage of in this build: the Claymore, the Ordered Blade incantation, and the Blood Flame Blade incantation. The Claymore gives me a versatile secondary weapon option, and the incantations give me a quick solution to undead and increased bleed application, 2 very useful tools. To cover for this, we need to push Dexterity, Intelligence, and Faith to 13 points, and then Arcane to 10. Once we take care of all of the requirements, we need to make a really big investment in order to reach the second soft cap for our damage skill, in this case, Strength. I like to go for the second soft cap because it produces enough damage and it allows me many leftover points to fine-tune the build. That being said, if you wish to sacrifice some utility elsewhere, you can also push the final soft cap of level 80. For the purposes of this build, our main weapon is going to be infused down the heavy path, so we are going to invest up to the second soft cap of 56. Like with everything else in this video, you will find a full guide on every single soft cap in the description. Do not hesitate to consult it. The next step is the simplest. However many points you have left after you have done all of the other steps, they all go into mind. In the case of our build, it is a total of 17 points, bringing our mind to 26. That said, I would do the same even if I only had 1 point. In my opinion, mind is not an important stat for most builds. I think that having about 10 mind is enough for most cases. Obviously, if you're making a caster build, whether it's intelligence or faith, you need to put more levels into mind. So, if you are making a caster, you should prioritize mind a bit more. Otherwise, it really doesn't matter. Now, even if you're making a caster build, my recommendation is that you do not level up mind past 38 points. Why? Well, at 38 mind, our character will have 221 FP points. A fully upgraded Cerulean Tears flask recovers a total of 220 FP points. In this way, with 38 mind and 221 FP, we are able to completely exhaust our FP bar and then completely recover it to full with a single flask every single time. 38 mind is the most efficient level for this stat as it provides us with the ability to cast multiple spells, but at the same time have a complete FP recovery without wasting additional skill points. In this case, since we are making a melee build, we are going to put the already mentioned extra 17 points into mind. As you can see, the build looks completed. We are at rune level 150, we have all of our equipment set up, and our skill points are correctly allocated. It looks pretty solid. That said, we are not done. There is one final step. My dear viewer, it is very possible that you are at this time questioning the reason why we pick our class at the last step. Shouldn't we do this at the beginning? In my opinion, no. The class that you're going to pick when you make your build should be the last thing that you decide on. The reason for this is simple. The only thing that starting classes are good for in Elden Ring is stat allocation, and maybe starting equipment. By picking a class that is the closest to your desired stat spread, we are able to further maximize our value by making sure that not a single point is wasted on unneeded stats. Of course, in order to do this, we need to know what our final stats will be, and for this reason, picking the starting class for the build is the very last thing that we will do. In this step, it is very important to have your planner so that you can test each of the game's classes with the final stat spread that you want to use. You go through every class one by one and you pick the one that gives you the most point efficiency with your finished build. The planner that I like to use puts the hero class as the default, and with this class we have a stat spread of 60 vigor, 26 mind, 37 endurance, 56 strength, 13 dexterity, 13 intelligence, 13 faith, and 11 arcane. It's a pretty good spread, but there is an extra point in arcane that we don't need, but we cannot remove because it is the minimum stat of the hero class. This means that the hero class makes us waste 1 skill point. Is this a lot? No. Can we deal with it? Yes. But still, let's see if we can get this point back and maybe put it into mind. Let's look at the other classes to see what kind of efficiency we can get. The Bandit starting class makes a strong initial investment into Arcane, but it is much more than we need. Not only this, but our needed stat allocation forces us to go beyond the rune level limitation. The result is that this class wastes 4 points in Arcane and we go 3 points over the limit. The Astrologer, as the definitive intelligence class, obviously makes a big investment into this stat, and of course, it is too much for what we need. Furthermore, the stat allocation forces us to go over the rune level limit to get our desired stats. The result is 3 wasted points and 2 points over the limit. The Warrior class gives us the same problems as the Astrologer, but with the Dexterity stat. It makes more investment into this stat than we need, and that means that we lose some efficiency, and we go over the rune level limit. This class wastes 3 points and puts us 2 points over our established limitation. The Prisoner is actually an interesting choice. It is not the best because it invests too much into dexterity and intelligence, but we can consider them acceptable as it is only 1 point extra in each. Still, this lack of efficiency forces us to go over the rune level limit. This class wastes 2 points and puts us 1 point over the limitation. Not bad, but not the best. The Confessor is a good choice for this build. It provides us the exact same efficiency as the hero. Its only issue is that it makes too much of an investment into the faith stat, even if it is minimal. Still, this class puts us at the exact rune level limit, so there is no need for any further adjustments. And, much like the hero class, this class wastes only 1 point. It's not the best, but it is a good choice. The Wretch steps up as one of the best choices for this build. Its balanced stat allocation allows us to make the exact investment needed without wasting a single point. Not only this, but it provides us with additional efficiency, letting us put an additional point into mind for more FP. Wretch gives us maximum efficiency, and it is a perfect choice for this build. The Vagabond, much like the Wretch, shows up as a perfect choice for this build. The stat allocation is once again perfect for what we're trying to make, and its efficiency is top tier. It also provides us with an extra skill point that we can invest into Mind for more FP. It is easy to see that this class is exactly what we need, providing us with 100% efficiency. Then we have the Prophet, a class that is not bad, but like many others, suffers from going too hard on a single stat. In this case, Faith. This forces us to waste points into this stat, and it also causes us to go beyond the rune level limit. It is definitely not the best choice, as it makes us waste 3 points and it goes 2 levels over the limit. Finally, the Samurai. This class shifts its preferences to dexterity, and it makes too large of an investment on this stat. It is more than we need, and that forces us to waste points. Furthermore, this overextension into dexterity makes it so that we go over the rune level limit. The result is that the Samurai wastes 2 points, and we go 1 point over the limitation. After this exercise, it is easy to see that the best classes for this build are the Wretch and the Vagabond. Both of these classes provide 100% efficiency, and they even give us an extra point that we can put into another stat, in this case, Mind. So, for this build, we can choose the Wretch or the Vagabond. Either will provide the same value for our desired stat allocation, but since we are in a statistical tie, it is important to check other factors, primarily equipment. It is impossible to ignore that the Wretch provides us very little starting equipment. Sure, the club is not a bad weapon, but there is also the fact that it gives us no armor. On the other hand, the Vagabond provides us with one of the best weapons in the game, the longsword, as well as a good shield and a halberd. Furthermore, the Vagabond armor set starts us with a little bit over 20% physical damage absorption. While both classes give us the same statistical efficiency, it is clear to see which one provides us with the better starting equipment. And so, the conclusion is simple. The absolute best starting class for this build is the Vagabond. It is the most valuable pick. And there you have it. We started with an idea and we concluded with a fully fleshed, optimized build. As with everything in life, the more practice you have with the system, the faster you will be at using it. Eventually, you will be able to put builds together in a matter of minutes. That said, under no circumstances is this the best way to do things. It is simply the way that I like to make builds. This process helps me cover all of the bases and experiment with different possibilities in order to find the perfect combination to reach the idea. I believe that it is easy to understand and easy to follow, so as to allow any player to make their build ideas a reality. Overall, I believe that all players can increase the efficiency of their favorite builds by using this method, and most importantly, it will help them bring their best ideas into reality. At the end of the day, my objective is simple. I want to see you, my dear viewer, make some interesting builds. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that I get to see you on the next one.